A pivot table is a powerful tool in Excel which allows you to summarize data from large, extensive tables, helping you to sort, filter, group, and reorganize data into your preferred format. It can also transpose rows into columns and columns into rows, hence its name. So let's take a look at an example. Here I have some data in an Excel worksheet that I want to combine into a pivot table report format. To do this, if I click anywhere in the data and then head across to Insert Pivot Table, Excel provides me with a number of options. And as you can see, it's selected the entire table range. It's worth checking that Excel is selecting the entire table and also including the column headers at the top. You'll see why this is so important shortly. You can reselect this if it isn't picking up the correct data. The next thing that we need to do is to decide where the pivot table report is to be placed, and there are two choices here. So we can opt for either an existing worksheet, so the pivot table can reside next to the original data, or my preferred choice is to place the pivot table in a new worksheet. So I'm going to select OK right here, and as you can see, I now have two extra tabs on the ribbon at the top, also a task panel on the right hand side, and the report layout itself to the left, which is currently blank. It's also worth mentioning that if you click outside of the report layout, the two tabs on the ribbon disappear and also the task pane disappears as well. So it's important that you make sure that your active cell is positioned within the layout. Okay, so the list of fields along the right-hand side, these represent the columns from the underlying data sheet, and these can be dragged onto the four different areas at the bottom right here to produce the report. So for example, if I hover over the region field and I drag and drop that onto the rows section, what Excel does is it adds each region in a separate row on the report. Now, if I move the region field from rows into columns, as you can see, it transposes into columns. So we can very easily just pick these fields up and we can move them around until we get the format that we want. What I'm going to do next is drop the month onto columns. So we have a separate column representing each month. And the values section, this is where the calculations take place. I'm going to take the numerical value, which is the sales, and drop that into values. And that will default to sum of sales. It recognizes that the sales column contains values. The final area is the filters. I want you to think of this as the entire report filter. And what I'm going to do is add the year field onto filters. And as you can see at the top, I've now got a filter drop-down button, which allows me to filter by a particular year. So if I select the 1992 year, it filters the data to show for that year. I can also do that for the column and the row labels. So if I wanted to hide the January, February and March columns, I can untick the boxes. And likewise, I can do that for the regions as well. So if I don't want to see the East and the West regions, I can take those out. And notice that there is a funnel attached to each of the filters. So you can see if a filter is applied, and you can also remove the filters by just going back in there and selecting the All option to return all of the data. Now, a couple of things to mention on the ribbon at the top. So on the Analyze tab, it's quite important that if you make any changes to the underlying data, if you want to get the latest data from the source, then you must refresh that. So if I go back onto my sheet 1 and I change one of the values in the sales column, and then I head back to my pivot table, I would need to refresh that. Likewise, if I wanted to add data outside of the existing range, so if I added an extra row at the bottom, so row 100, add an extra row in there, I would need to expand the range. So I would select change data source and I would expand that to include that row. So two very important options to keep in mind just there. So that's it for this lesson. Join me for part 2 to learn more about pivot tables. Thanks for watching.